So I'm primarily a birder, and I have been using the Sony A7V for capturing photos of the birds in the field, making these YouTube videos, and doing all sorts of stuff related specifically to birds and wildlife photography. So this review is going to focus on how the Sony A7V performs in the field with that aspect of photography. If you're new, my name's Hawken, and if you're returning, thanks for coming back. You might recognize I'm in a different space than usual. My basement's being worked on, unfortunately, so I don't have my studio. You'll have to make do with the desk we have in our bedroom that my girlfriend uses. But today I have a very exciting video, like I mentioned in the intro. We are talking about my new camera body, still fairly new. I've used it for a couple months now, and I'm gonna give a complete review of how this has performed for me. First, I'm going to talk about the body itself, then we're going to talk about video performance since I primarily do YouTube videos like this one, and then we'll end with some of the stuff related to photos. Also, just so you know, there'll be chapters down below so you can switch between the sections if you'd like to. This camera body, the first thing I want to show you is its overall form factor, because I do know a lot of people complain about this. They don't like how Sony cameras feel in their hand related to other systems. This battery grip right here, it's not big enough for them. I have relatively shorter fingers though, and I'm pretty pleased with how my grip is around this thing. I'm also not constantly carrying this out in the field. I use a cotton carrier to carry my gear, so it's usually hanging off my chest and I'm not constantly holding it, so maybe that's why I have less of an issue with it, but it feels pretty natural and comfortable in my hand personally. I do like the overall shape. I also do enjoy that's a little bit bigger than my Sony A6700 II, and then the viewfinder is in the middle versus on the side. It just feels more natural when I hold the camera up to my face. Since it's in the middle, I can use my nose to brace against the camera to provide me even more stabilization. And so I'm a fan with how the form factor of this whole thing at a like overall package. Now this camera comes with a 33 megapixel partially stacked sensor. Kind of interesting that the Sony A7 IV also had a 33 megapixel camera, and this one 5 years later I think now, actually, since the Sony A7 IV was released, has the same megapixels. You would have expected them to bump it up a bit. However, the partially stacked is new, and that means the sensor readout speeds are a lot faster than the Sony A7 IV was. This allows for things like higher frame rate shooting, less rolling shutter, though if you're pushing it to its extreme, you might still see some rolling shutter. I haven't noticed that yet, but I've seen some other reviews that do mention it. Just like most of Sony's other cameras, this uses the E-mount lens system, so all of the lenses you already have that were compatible with your old cameras will work with this one too, which is great. You can also use APS-C lenses on this camera, even though it is a full frame body. If you'd like to, you just have to put the camera in APS-C mode and it'll crop in a little bit and you'll still be able to use that lens. But personally, my favorite thing about this body is all of the custom buttons. There are 3 mappable custom buttons dedicated with C1, C2, and C3, but you can also change a lot of the other buttons and stuff you find on this. And then one difference from some of the APS-C mirrorless cameras that Sony offers is their full frame line has an extra dial on the top. So you can use one of them to change aperture, and you can use another one for maybe shutter speed, or you could map it to switching between focus areas, for example. Oh, and if you're interested in the custom buttons that I use and I've found to be the most helpful for me as a wildlife photographer, let me know. I'd love to make a video about that if that's something you want to hear. And as another close thing, I don't know if I could live with a camera without this feature nowadays, is swapping between photo and video mode. And the fact that I can use my top dial to use 3 different presets between these modes is so huge. It allows me to switch between taking a video of the bird for YouTube, going at a normal filming frame rate, and then I can switch to my other preset. That's the ultra slow-mo if I need to capture something very quickly, or I can quickly shift over to photo mode to grab a few photos of the bird too after I've gotten the video. As for weather sealing, I have not pushed this thing to the limits because I don't want to ruin my expensive piece of gear, but it is moisture and dust resistant, like it's been sealed for those things. And I've taken it out to areas like the Great Salt Lake that do get sandy and nothing's ever gotten inside the camera. And I've had it out in a little bit of light rain, but I would be personally worried about pushing it past that, again, because I want to protect my gear and make sure it lasts a long time. So I don't have too much to report on that front after a few months. And the last thing, as we round out kind of the body and features, let's talk about the I/O and the ports it has on it. So you'll find two USB ports. One is ideal for streaming and media transfer. The other is more focused on power delivery. It also comes with a full-size HDMI port. It has a 3.5mm mic output, and then it also has a separate input for being able to monitor your audio by plugging in a pair of headphones. Flipping to the other side of the camera, that's where your SD cards go, or I should be more specific. There's one card slot that is CF Express Type A, and there's a second card slot that is an SD card. Now I know some people preferred that they were both CF Express Type A, kind of for backup and redundancy, but there are a lot of shooters that do still use just SD cards because they're cheaper. They're cheaper and easier to work with, and they're more compatible directly with a lot of different laptops and stuff. At least my laptop has a built-in SD card reader. It does not have a CF Express Type A reader. So I can see the benefits of having both different card slots. I primarily always use the CF Express Type A slot. I keep an SD card in there just as backup if my other card was to fail. Okay, let's get into video. This is what I use the camera for most often. I do like taking photos too, but doing YouTube, I just love capturing good videos of birds. With this camera, you can go up to 10-bit color at a 422 codec. That'll offer you the most flexibility you can get color grading. There are also options for 8-bit. Those like kind of tech specs aside though, I've been super pleased with the results I've been getting. The picture is clear and crisp, and I feel like it is super sharp. I film most of my wildlife footage at 4K 60 frames a second, and this will allow me to slow down the footage in post, which is super helpful. There are times too where I will use 4K 120 for that ultra slow motion. That is primarily for when birds are flying, or I have a really fast bird, let's say like a hummingbird for example. I haven't gotten the chance to film any hummingbirds with this camera yet because I've only had it for the winter, but that would be a perfect use case for that 4K 120. Just note that the 4K 120 does crop into APS-C mode, so it is going to cut the frame in a little bit. It'll still be delivering a 4K image back to you for you to edit and stuff, but it's cropped in, so if you're shooting something super close to you or you need that wide view, just something to take note of. And now focusing in video. Sony is known for their focusing systems, and this camera is incredible. It has AI subject recognition. It allows you to pick from a variety of subjects that you want the camera to prioritize focusing on. There's animal, bird, plane, person, insect. It has a lot, and it does extremely well. The camera has those subject recognitions off by default, but once you enable them, it finds birds like crazy, and I've been super pleased with this. Even dealing with things like branches and such, I've been so impressed with how it's been able to find the bird species while focusing. I still do have to flip to manual focus in a handful of scenarios, and I often will do that to make sure my focus doesn't move around at times, but this has been phenomenal, at least getting me into the right area. And if the bird is clearly in view, I know it is gonna lock on. And like a lot of other shooters, I don't use the focus that is defaulted to the shutter button. I personally use back button focus. The way that works with video mode is as you're taking a video and you have autofocus continuous on, it'll continue to focus on those subjects. And when you lock it, you hold down the focusing button, the box will go green and it'll stay there and it won't move around. Now if you want to let it find the subject again, you just let it go and it'll go back to that for the video. Now let's talk stabilization. This is one of the most important features because I know a lot of people, myself included, like to be more of a run and gun style. And when you're out birding, sometimes you're hiking, for example, and you don't want to lug a tripod along with you. You will always get the best results if you use a tripod, and I try to whenever I can, but some days I just want to be on the move. And so when I pull my camera out to video with this huge lens, it is difficult to stabilize a wildlife lens. You are so zoomed in, any little shakes your hands have are going to transfer into this camera and you're going to see a lot of movement, and that's where the stabilization becomes super important. So with this setup that I currently use, the Sony A7V and the Sony 200-600, I have been pretty pleased. This upgrade was the one I was most excited about, coming from my Sony A6700. This camera has 7.5 stops of in-body image stabilization, 7.5 stops of compensation, I should say. There's 5-axis in-body image stabilization in this camera, so I'm gonna put some clips up on the screen just so you can judge for yourself and see if that's what you deem to be usable amounts of shake in the video. With the stabilization, when you're shooting in video, you do have a couple of modes you can use to help. There, you can have stabilization off, you can turn it to standard, you can turn it to active, or you can use dynamic active. Now, I use active personally, that's using the mechanical stuff inside the camera and a little bit of electronic compensation for the video. I don't personally use dynamic active because it crops into the frame a little bit, and so I've been using active myself. I'll show you the difference between standard and active by putting a few videos on the screen right now. And you can tell me if you believe this to be usable. Now, again, tripods are always going to be king. You're not going to be able to get around that. The stuff, I've been pretty happy with the handheld stabilization. With the lens having OSS and my camera having in-body image stabilization, I can get fairly usable results. Especially if you slow footage down, that takes some of the shake out of it even more. However, I will definitely say I've been super jealous of my friends who shoot on Nikon. Their stabilization is unreal, and I don't know what the difference is between their cameras and mine. It might be the lens mount system that's allowed to be able to be stabilized even more. It might be just that the lenses have that much better stabilization built into them because this 200-600 is fairly old at this point. But there's something about it that they get crazy handheld results that I'm super impressed with. I would say this one gets a B if I was grading it on a letter scale. One of the most important aspects of video is audio, and thankfully this camera does have that external mic output. I've been fairly pleased with the audio. I'm not an audio expert myself. It's something I'm actively trying to improve because birdsong just takes videos to a whole nother level, but the fact that you can connect your external mics like most other cameras will allow you to get better audio results. The audio straight out of cameras, okay, I've used it in a pinch before, but I definitely wouldn't rely on it. A couple other quick things I'll mention. Heat management is sometimes a concern for people. I have not shot out in hot conditions yet because I've only had this for the winter, so I've not dealt with a ton of sun, but I've never had this camera power off, and I know there's a bunch of new technology within the camera body itself that deals with heat very well. So all I can report is I've had no issues so far, and I've had some videos at 4K 60 and 4K 120 running for a good bit of time, just making sure I capture the bird that I'm looking at. And I didn't know where to put this one, so I'm just gonna shoehorn it into the video section because the most draining on your battery is video. And so battery life is unreal. I cannot believe how good the battery life is on the Sony A7V. And what blows my mind even more is it uses the same camera battery as so many of the other Sony bodies, but the battery life jumped up substantially. That is incredible because that means you don't have to buy new batteries if you own previous models of the Sony cameras. And batteries I have for this camera will work with the Sony A6700 that I'm filming on right now. And so I can have a handful of batteries that are interchangeable between my cameras, which is awesome. But I know this one will last. I have not gone through a single battery yet in filming one of my videos. Now, I haven't done a full day shoot where like something like a global big day where I'm filming a ton of birds. If that was the case, I would definitely expect to go through about a battery and a half, but that's hours and hours of shooting. On the few hour trips I kind of go on to make these videos right now, like 2 to 3 hours, I have not even dipped below 40%, I don't think. It is nuts how long the battery lasts. Okay, let's talk photo performance in this camera. I have been super pleased with the photos I've been getting out of this one, and there's been some new features that were introduced in this body that I was really excited to use and test out. And so all of the stuff put together, I feel like has resulted in me getting better photos that are sharp, ones I'm happy with. I use electronic shutter all the time with this camera. On my previous camera, I was using mechanical shutter as I was worried the electronic shutter would offer worse performance potentially, especially with things like rolling shutter. With the improvements this camera has made on the sensor performance and the new processing chips and stuff inside of it, it has really great like read and write speeds to the cards that electronic shutter is actually, I feel like, what they push you towards. Because if we're shooting bursts, we can go up to 30 frames per second, which is nuts. You can capture like every tiny minuscule movement of a bird, and you're much more likely to get that exact pose that you really want to. With a mechanical shutter, This camera can still shoot with the mechanical shutter. You are limited to, I believe, 10 frames a second. So I pretty much leave the electronic shutter on all the time. Well, I don't pretty much, I do that. Now, I'm not always shooting at that full burst rate, otherwise I'd have a ton of photos to comb through at some point. Sometimes I shoot a little bit slower if I'm dealing with something like ducks, for example. But it's nice to know that feature is there as I need it. So like for birds in flight or those really quick species like hummingbirds, the warblers hopping around the canopy, I'm super pumped that I have those. The ability to shoot that many photos in such a short time frame. Another feature that I didn't know other cameras suffered from because I've only used Sony is that when you're shooting these bursts and you're looking through the viewfinder, it never blacks out. So some cameras, when you're taking photos, the whole screen will go off because it needs to compensate and write that photo you just took to the card. And this camera can do both while still showing you a live picture. So you can keep your subject framed as you're moving around and you won't have your screen flickering on and off for you as you're composing your photos, which is awesome. Another exciting photo feature that I was really pumped to have was the pre-capture. Now pre-capture, the way it works is if you are holding the shutter down like kind of half pressed, that's how you focus the camera if you haven't turned that feature off. If you have that held down, it's gonna like slowly buffer through images, and then when you press the shutter, it'll save images up to a second before you've actually pressed the shutter. Let's say I'm looking at an osprey or any raptor up on a telephone pole and I know it's gonna take off. I can hold down the shutter halfway and wait till it takes off and then press it, and it'll get me that moment of it taking off as well as continuing to take photos as I hold the shutter down. That's pretty cool and allows you to get a lot more moments that you would have otherwise potentially missed. The alternative of not having pre-capture is just to constantly take photos, but then you're gonna fill up your SD cards quicker, you're gonna have a lot more photos to go through. So pre-capture does offer a nice benefit for those niche scenarios. Now, I did talk through the focusing system earlier as I was in the video section. Just a few mentions about focus and photo mode because it's slightly different. Focusing in photo mode is quicker and snappier than video. Video doesn't want to be hunting and jumping around back and forth too much, but photo is you're only capturing one frame instead of a continuous video, so they know you can get away with jumping focus to something else very quickly, and that allows you to get onto your subject fast and take a picture. All the same recognition stuff still applies in photo mode that I talked about in the video mode section, but there are a few different focus areas that you have available to you. If you're using the spot focus, for example, you can set it to be spot focus tracking. So when you lock onto the subject and with the spot focus and you're holding your focus onto that subject, as you move away from it, it'll stay on that subject if you kept your focus locked. Now, I will mention a very annoying quirk with editing at the moment. Lightroom still doesn't support compressed RAWs, and that's my preferred format. I know a lot of people want uncompressed, they want the full photo quality. I shoot compressed personally because I want lower file sizes and I feel like you don't sacrifice a ton of quality doing that. But for some reason, Lightroom can't read that format yet because the camera's still that new and they need to implement something. At least at the time of making this video, that's true. So I expect that to be resolved at some point. It's just a weird annoyance and quirk that I wanted to mention right now. I almost forgot to do an outro, so sorry if the camera angle changed a little bit slightly. Overall though, I have been super pleased with the Sony A7V and it is a phenomenal camera. I hope you found this review helpful. If you have any questions about the camera or stuff maybe I didn't cover in this video that you might be curious about, you can leave them in the comments. I'll try and answer them if I'm able to. Thank you as always though for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Happy birding.